Hello guys, welcome to today's video. I thought it was time for me to give you guys some recommendations of books that I think that you should put on your TBR for this year. These are basically some of my all-time favourite books, and I thought since I've done a lot of videos over Bookmas and also in the new year, either 2025 new releases that I'm really excited to read, and I did 25 books that I really want to read in 2025, so they're books that I haven't read yet but are on my TBR for the year, and I thought it was time for me to give you some recommendations of some of my favourite books that you can then add to your TBR. Also, really quick, before we get started, there are now 20,000 of you which I literally cannot believe. I just wanted to jump in here and say a massive thank you, because what? Literally, what on earth? You honestly have no idea how much that means to me, and I'm just so happy that you're here. So honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And I'm honestly so grateful, and I cannot believe it. I literally cannot believe it. Anyway, let's get on to the video. So since it's 2025, I thought I'd do 25 recommendations. I've kind of split them up into genres, but also kind of not really. You'll see what I mean. So I've loosely grouped them. But let's just get straight into it because we have 25 of them to get through. Where do we start? I think I'm going to start with romance. I feel like that's a good place to start. Okay, my first recommendation, and probably if you've seen any of my videos before, you can probably guess what it is because it's my all-time favourite book series. That's Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I'm literally obsessed with this entire series. The best way I can kind of sum this up is it's kind of like Made in Chelsea meets Gossip Girl kind of vibe. We have BJ and Magnolia, and these two people are basically destined to be together, but for whatever reason they just can't make it work, and it's always right person, wrong time kind of situation. It's full of drama. We've got found family as well because this group of characters is just so good, and you literally just become obsessed with them, and you get a lot of different points of views as well, because in this one we have Magnolia and BJ, and then in the second one, which is Daisy Hates, you have Daisy Hates, you have Julian Hates, which is her brother, and Christian, who is her sort of love interest. And what I love, and I just think is so unique to this series, because I've personally not seen it done in any other series so far, but that the Magnolia Parks book and the Daisy Hates books are all set at the same time. So it follows the same timeline, but we're following what these different people are doing in that timeline, if that makes sense. So we read this book and then we go to Daisy Hates, and it takes us back timeline-wise to the start of this one. But we're following Daisy and Julian and Christian and seeing what they're up to. And the thing that I absolutely love about this series is the writing style. I could literally highlight this entire book because the writing is just absolutely stunning, and there's just so many things where she describes Magnolia or BJ's like thoughts or feelings, and I'm like, that's literally how I felt before, but I've never been able to put that into words. So Jessa Hastings' writing is just top tier. Top tier. And if you like the kind of soulmates trope where they're just destined to be together and you know that they are reading it and it's just about them finding their way back to each other, then you'll definitely absolutely love this series. And then we have another one of my favourites, Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is part of an interconnected standalone series. We have Part of Your World, which is the first one, Yours Truly, which is the second, and then Just for the Summer, which is the third, but I will talk about that one in a minute. So because they're interconnected standalones, you could read them on their own. However, I would really recommend reading these in order, and you'll know why I say that when you get to the third book. I nearly jumped straight to the third one, and I'm so glad that I didn't. I'm so glad that I read them in order. My personal favourites are the first one and the third one, which I feel like is kind of an unpopular opinion actually, because I know that Yours Truly, the second one, gets so much hype and it's literally everybody's favourite in the series, but I personally really liked this one. In this one we have Alexis, who is a doctor and she lives in the city, and we have Daniel, who's a carpenter and he basically lives out in the countryside. So we have these two kind of opposing people, and we see them coming together and trying to make kind of their worlds work together. There's also an age gap trope in here, and I'm somebody that's not naturally drawn to age gap tropes, but I thought it actually worked really well in here, and I actually really like how it was done. The thing that I absolutely love about all of Abby Jimenez's books is the way that she builds characters and the way that she creates a story between them, because everything in here just feels so genuine and real, and I feel like they have such a good balance of being really fun but at the same time dealing with harder topics, giving representation to certain feelings or certain experiences, and I just love the way that's done because I just think it's balanced really well, and it doesn't make the book feel heavy because it's still really fun and a fun little romance at the same time. So I absolutely loved Part of Your World. And then Just for the Summer, which is my favourite one by her. In this one we have Justin and Emma, and they basically both separately think that they are cursed when it comes to dating, and every single person that they date, that person, when they break up, goes on to find the one and they get married and everything. So they've both individually experienced this kind of dating curse, and they meet each other online and they think it's a good idea to kind of date each other to then, in theory, break the curse and go on to find their soulmate. It's honestly just so much fun, and I absolutely love the characters in this one. I love the way that they are together, and I just thought this was such a fun read. And I just loved it. I loved it, and I would definitely recommend. Then we have The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This is just such a feel-good book. If you need a little pick-me-up book, if you need something that's just going to make you laugh, I would definitely recommend this. It really reminds me of like Bridget Jones kind of humour. It's very British humour, which I just love. And the concept of this one is really unique. We basically follow Delphi, and at the start of this, Delphi finds herself in the afterlife, and while she's there she meets this stranger, and they have this little interaction together, and there's a mix up with him and he gets sent back to Earth, and she's really gutted because she felt like there was something between them. So this afterlife therapist that is there with her basically makes her a deal that she can go back to Earth for 10 days, and if she can find this man and get him to kiss her, then she can stay on Earth. So then we follow Delphi going back to Earth, trying to track this man down, and she knows nothing about him other than his first name. And just the situations that she ends up in are just so funny, and it's honestly a book where I didn't stop smiling throughout the whole thing, and it's just such a good time. Honestly, it's just such a good time, so much fun, and we'll literally just have you giggling the whole time. Next we have 7 Years Slave by Ashley Poston. This one is just a magical romance, honestly. Just has such a special feeling to it. This one is a romance with a bit of a magical realism element to it. In this one we follow Clementine, and she's really close with her aunt, and her aunt has this apartment and has always told stories about it travelling 7 years in time. And Clementine's sort of just thought it was all made up and has never really believed her, until one day she gets home from work, she walks into her kitchen, and there's a strange man, and he ends up being from 7 years in the past. Just that whole concept is so good, and I feel like there was so much anticipation in this book because you're kind of like, where is he now in present day? Will she ever find him? How is she going to find him? And I just absolutely love a romance with something more to it or something slightly different about it, and this is definitely one of those. And this is one where the writing is so good that I literally wish that I'd annotated it when I was reading it, and it just makes me want to reread it so I can go back and annotate it because there's just so many good quotes in here, and it's definitely one that I would love to reread at some point as well. Next we have Seven Summers by Paige Toon. This is another one where if you kind of like the soulmate trope, I think you'd really enjoy this one. This one is set over 7 different summers. We follow Liv and Finn, and we get to see them meeting, and they basically make a deal with each other that if they're both single, that they'll come back together each summer and spend the summer together. Then we get to see them over the years and how things have changed in their life, how they've changed as people, and you get that kind of will they won't they sort of feeling throughout the whole thing. And this one, the writing is so easy to read, it's so fast paced. I literally read this in under 24 hours I think, because I was just absolutely hooked in their story and I just needed to know what was happening, and I really liked Liv and Finn together. I really liked them. Then we have The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. This is actually a recent read for me, and I've really enjoyed it. It was just so much fun. We follow Hallie and Jack, and they have this one night stand together, basically think they're never going to see each other again, but then they end up seeing each other on a dating app, and they start messaging each other back and forth basically about each other's dates and on their journey to find the one. So they basically become friends, and they make a bet with each other on who can find their soulmate first. But even though they've got this bet going on, they are also very much in it together and trying to help each other as well. And I just love the way this was done, because the way that they kind of bounced off each other and the way that they joked with each other was so fun to read. I also really like that a lot of this was dialogue and a lot of it was text messages, because it just makes it so fast paced to read. And this is definitely one that I would recommend if you need to get out of a reading slump, or if you just need something that you can get through really quickly. It's just a really good, cheesy, feel-good rom-com, and I would definitely recommend. Okay, this is my last romance, well, at least adult romance, because I do have a couple in my YA section, which I will get to, but the last one in my adult romance pile is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This is my favourite Emily Henry book. I absolutely loved it. In this one we have a group of friends going on holiday together, and within this group of friends we have Harry and Wyn, who used to be engaged but they're not anymore, but their friendship group doesn't know. So they all end up going on this holiday together, but because their friends don't know, they kind of have to pretend that they're still together because they don't want to put a damper on the holiday. They don't want to bring everybody else down. So we've got a second chance romance situation going on. We slowly get to find out why they're not together, what actually happened between them, and then we also have this dynamic of the friendship group. And that's what I really loved about this. I love that it felt like more than just a romance. There was so much in here about friendships and about adulthood and how different types of relationships change over time and how they evolve, learning to kind of be okay with that. It was just very easy to read, and because we have the present timeline where they're all on holiday, but then we also have the past where we're kind of finding out about Win and Harriet and what actually happened between them, it really keeps you turning the pages because you just want to know what's happening in both timelines. It's just a very easy romance that will just keep you hooked the entire time. Okay, moving on to YA recommendations. We have a mixture in here, so I'm just going to get straight into it. Let's start off with fantasy. I feel like that's a good place to start. The first YA fantasy that I'm going to recommend is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is a great one to start if you're wanting to get into more fantasy but you just don't know what book to start with. This was actually my first fantasy that I read, and I think it's a really good one to start with because the world building isn't overwhelming in any way. It's very easy to follow, and the characters in here will just have you obsessed. This one is set in a world where we have elites, and elites have different types of powers, and then we also have the ordinaries who have no powers. And it's set in this kingdom where ordinaries are banished, and as a reminder of their sort of power that they have, they enter a certain amount of elites into these trials. And we have Payden, who is actually an ordinary, who's basically in disguise pretending to be an elite, and she actually ends up getting entered into these trials with all these people that have powers. And that's all I'm going to say about this one. The romance in here, so good. The banter, the tension between them, the slow burn. I'm literally obsessed, I think it's really Payden and Kai that make this what it is for me, because the way that they are together literally just had me giggling, kicking my feet, and I just became absolutely obsessed with them. We also have the trials in here as well, and it's just such a good fast-paced read, and it's very easy to read as well because it is YA. I also do just want to say that these YA books, literally anybody can read. It's not just for young adults. Some of my absolute favourite books of all time are YA books, so these are literally recommendations for anybody. But this one just a really easy, fast-paced read, and definitely a good one to start with if you want to get into more fantasy. Next we have The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, which if you've seen any of my videos recently, I literally won't stop talking about this series. It has become my absolute new obsession. I just love it. I love it. This one follows Kiva, and Kiva is the prison healer. She works in this death prison, but she's also a prisoner, so she's also trying to survive there as well. We have elemental trials in here. We have a slow burn romance situation, and that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to spoil anything, and I feel like this whole series in general is kind of hard to sum up without giving spoilers, so I'm gonna leave it there. I absolutely loved it. The writing in here just makes you feel so connected with Kira, and you literally feel like you're going through it all with her. And I literally read this whole series back to back because I just couldn't get enough of these characters and this whole world. I just love it, and it's become one of my new favourite series ever. Then we have Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This one is a very kind of magical, whimsical kind of fantasy. It's got a very different vibe to the other two that I mentioned, and the writing in this one is definitely very YA writing. Just something to note because I think it is very noticeable. This one we follow Evangeline, and the love of her life is about to get married to somebody else. So she makes a deal with the Prince of Hearts, but no deal comes for free because in exchange he also wants something back from her. And again, that's all I'm going to say about this one. This one definitely does have a kind of fairy tale-esque, magical, whimsical kind of feel to it, and every single one of these books is just so chaotic in the best way. Like, they literally feel like a fever dream after you've read them. And also, just in case you're wondering, there's the Caraval series, which some people do recommend to read before you go into this series. I personally didn't. I personally just went straight into the series and I understood everything absolutely fine. So I would personally say that you can read this by itself, but I can't say which one is better to do because I haven't read the Caraval series. If you're like me and you're more interested in this one, then I would definitely say just go straight to this series. Moving on to some YA romance. First up we have Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is just so cute. It's honestly just such a cute book. This is really giving vibes of To All the Boys I Loved Before, The Kissing Booth. The vibe that those movies and books have, this literally has that vibe. This one we follow Liz, and Liz is a bit of a hopeless romantic. She loves her romance films. Every single chapter in here starts off with a quote from a romance film, which I just absolutely love. And Liz really likes this guy Michael, and she really wants to get Michael to ask her to prom. So Wes, who is her next door neighbour, has kind of been in her life since they were kids. He offers to help Liz try and get Michael to ask her to prom. And this is just such a cute little high school YA romance. And it's just a good vibe in general. It's just a good vibe. Next we have If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin, which is one of my all-time favourite books. This book honestly just has a special place in my heart. Like Autumn and Finney, oh, I just absolutely adore them. I don't really know how to sum this one up other than we have Autumn and Finney, who have been best friends since they were little. They get to high school and they kind of go their separate ways. They don't really talk anymore. And then it kind of follows them slowly missing each other and wanting to be a part of each other's lives again. That's kind of the best way that I can sum this book up, but this is one of the books that actually got me into reading. It is a very heartbreaking book, so be aware of that when you go into it, because if you don't like sad books, then I don't think you're gonna like this. I absolutely loved it. I just felt so connected to these two characters, and this story is literally one that I think about all the time, and I literally read it like 2 years ago and I still think about it to this day, and it's honestly one that has just stuck with me, and these characters have just stuck with me, and I just love it. I love it. And then we have Heartstopper. I would honestly recommend this whole series, even though I haven't read it all yet. But I know that I'm going to. I've read the first two. They're just such wholesome books, honestly. We followed Charlie and Nick, and they're basically in high school together. We followed them kind of trying to work out what their friendship slash relationship situation is or could potentially be. These books honestly just feel like a hug. That's the best way I can explain it. Like, they're just so warm and wholesome, and because they're graphic novels, this is another one that I would recommend if you're in a reading slump or you just need something really fast paced, because this is one where you literally forget you're reading because you're just so invested in the story, and because it's a graphic novel it's just so easy to read and it literally feels like you're watching an episode of a series. I know that this is a series on Netflix, which I haven't seen yet. I'm so excited to see what it's like as an actual series. I was actually really surprised at how much you can convey in a graphic novel, how much emotion and like different expressions that you can get across. I feel like I just understood these characters really well, and it was just a really fun read. I can't wait to carry on with this series. Okay, and then moving on to YA books that aren't romance. First up we have Every Last Word by Tamara Islandstone. This book, I honestly think this is one of the most underrated books that I've ever read. I don't even really know what genre this kind of fits in. We follow Samantha, who has OCD, and it kind of follows her trying to navigate her life with OCD. And one day at school she stumbles across this poet's corner where this group of students come together and they basically read a bit of poetry, and she becomes really invested in this group, and through this poet's corner she finds a love of poetry, and it becomes one of her ways to express herself. And in here what I really liked is that we actually got some of the poems that she wrote, which I thought was a really nice little additional thing in here. And that's the best way that I can describe this, I think. I would just say read it, literally read it, because it is one of my favourite books that I've read. It's one that has genuinely stuck with me, and when I tell you that there is something in this book where I was literally staring at a wall with my jaw on the floor like, I could not believe what I was reading, and I literally just want all of you to experience what I experienced. So that's why I'm recommending this. It's just so good. It's so good, and when you think you know kind of what's going to happen, it literally just catches you off guard. And it's one that ever since I finished reading it, which was like 2 years ago, that I always recommend because I just love it, and I think it deserves so much more hype than it actually gets. Next we have We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, which is a YA psychological thriller. This was another one that literally got me into reading. It's very short and very fast paced, very easy to read. This one we followed the Sinclair family, and they're very well off. They have their own island that they go to every summer. So it follows them going to this island, the whole families come back together, and I'm trying to work out what I can say without giving it away. It basically follows this really well-off family. There's a lot of family drama between them. There's also this kind of mystery thriller element of something that happened. I know that's so vague. But I honestly feel like that's all I can say. This is another one that literally had my jaw on the floor. Like, I couldn't believe what I was reading. And again, it's one that has really stuck with me since I put it down. This is also coming out as a TV show this year, so I'm recommending it to read before the TV show comes out because I just feel like the show is going to be so good. So good. So this is your reminder that if you haven't read this book yet, to read it. And then the last YA book that I have is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This one we have a group of teenagers, and these teenagers all have some specialised skill of some sort. They have a sort of expertise and they get recruited by the FBI to help work on and solve cold cases. So we follow these group of teenagers working on these cases. I love this group of characters so much, and I love how throughout the whole series we get to learn every single one of them a little bit more. So there's 4 books in total and a novella. Every single one of these books is so fast paced, so easy to read, so gripping, and it's definitely a series where you literally forget that you're reading because you're just so invested in the story and invested in these characters. And I always say that this is literally YA Criminal Minds, and I love that each book feels like one episode on its own. Each book focuses on a different case, but then there's also one bigger case situation going on across the whole series as well. So if you like Criminal Minds or you like kind of crime mystery sort of vibe, then I would definitely recommend this series. Okay, moving on to thrillers. First up we have The Castaways by Lucy Clarke. This is another one that I think is just so underrated. This is a similar vibe to Lost. We follow 2 sisters and they're basically both meant to go on holiday together, and one of them gets on the plane and one of them doesn't. So we have the sister that got on the plane ends up crashing on an island, and she's basically stranded on this island with the passengers that survived from this plane crash. And then we follow the other sister who is looking for her sister that went missing. Does that make sense? And what really stood out to me in this one is that I actually really enjoyed both points of views. I thought I would be way more invested in the one that was actually on the island compared to the one that was looking for her. I found both these points of views so fast paced and so gripping in their own way. And this is another one that also has a TV show as well, which I did enjoy, but I do think that the book is way better. And then we have Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This was so good. This was so good. In this one we follow Mallory, and she gets this job looking after a 5-year-old, and this 5-year-old boy is really into art. He keeps drawing all these pictures, and these pictures slowly start to become more and more sinister. And Mallory starts to think that there's something more going on, something more sinister happening. It definitely has an on-edge kind of eerie, creepy vibe to it, and it's also got this sort of supernatural element to it as well. The thing that I really enjoyed about this is that you actually have the pictures that he's drawn included in the book, and it just makes it so fast paced, so fun to read. The writing in here is very easy to read as well. It's one that I literally read so quickly because I just had to know what was going on, and I was just gripped literally from the first chapter. Then we have Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This is one of my favourite Frida McFadden books. This one is set in a big manor house in the middle of nowhere. We follow these newlyweds who go there to have a look around this house to potentially buy it, but when they get there the estate agent never shows, and they actually end up getting snowed in to this big manor house. And this house used to belong to a psychiatrist who went missing, and because they're snowed in they start to have a look around and they find this room that's basically filled with tapes between the psychiatrist and her clients. So they start to listen to these tapes and try and work out what actually happened and whether they can find any clues as to where the psychiatrist is and how she went missing and everything. And what I really enjoyed is that some of this is actually in transcript form when they're actually listening to the recordings, and I just found that that made it so fast paced, and it also felt like we were listening to the recordings with them. And I remember reading this and literally having that feeling that like somebody was watching me. That's the kind of creepy, eerie vibe that this book has, and literally just kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time, which I just absolutely loved. And like I said, one of my favourite Frida McFadden books. Another one of my favourites is Ward D. This one we follow Amy, who is a medical student, and she has to do a night shift on this psychiatric ward, and she really doesn't want to do this night shift, but she has to as part of her course. So this one is all set over the course of one night in this locked psychiatric ward, and the vibe of this is just so well done. Like, it literally feels like we're in there with her, and it just has you on edge. It has a real eerie feel to it, and we also start to realise that there might be a reason as to why Amy just really doesn't want to do this night shift. And that's all I'm gonna say. Next we have The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. This was actually one of the books that got me into reading in the first place. I just became absolutely hooked on this story. So in this one we have Tallulah, who goes missing, and we follow her mum basically trying to track her down and trying to find out what happened. And Lisa Jewell's writing is just so fast paced, so easy to read, and very bingeable, which is one of the reasons why I love her writing style and love her books. And I'd also really recommend Lisa Jewell's books if you like kind of more of a mystery and less of a thriller. Like, it definitely does have thriller elements to it, but I would say that her books mainly are more kind of mystery based. So if you think you would prefer mystery kind of vibe, then I would definitely recommend her books, and I would definitely recommend this one. Then we have Where the Crawdads Sing. This is another one of my all-time favourite books. This honestly has a little bit of everything in it. It's a coming of age story, but it's also got a bit of a romance situation in it. There's also mystery elements and thriller elements. It's literally a bit of everything. And it's one of my go-to recommendations for that reason. In this one we follow Kaya, and Kaya lives out in the marshes, and this book is essentially growing up with her, which I absolutely loved because I just felt so connected with Kaya as a character, and it literally felt like I was growing up with her. I also think the way that everything is described in here is just so atmospheric. I love the whole setting and the vibe. And then on top of this coming of age story, we also have this mystery going on, which I honestly didn't see coming when I was reading it, but I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And this is one that was actually turned into a film, and I think the film adaptation was so good. It was honestly exactly as I imagined it in my head when I read it, but this is one that I would still recommend reading the book before you watch the film. But just the way that the film was done, I just absolutely loved, and it's probably one of my favourite film adaptations of a book, to be honest. Bold statement, I know. Okay, well, on to the last two books. These are ones that kind of didn't really fit into a category, so I kind of just left them till the end. The first one we have is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This one I don't really know what genre it is. I think it's just fiction, to be honest. But I really enjoy this whole series. So this book series is all set in a cafe in Tokyo, and it's actually a time travelling cafe. So we follow these different people going into this cafe and wanting to time travel, and we find out who they want to go and see, we find out why they want to go and see them, and then we also follow them going to time travel and that whole interaction and what actually happens when they go and meet them. And each book in the series is split into 4 chapters essentially, but they're basically like 4 short stories because we follow a different person in each one of those chapters. And there is just something so heartfelt and wholesome about these stories and these people, and there's just something so lovely about humans' connections with other humans and getting to see that and read about it. It honestly just feels like we're reading about these people's lives and things that they've been through, and yeah, I just feel like it's a very special book series and just very wholesome vibes. And then last but not least, the 25th book that I'm going to recommend for you to put in your TBR for 2025 is The Wind in the Willows. This is one of those books that I kind of feel like everybody should read just because it is so much fun. It's just such a happy book. That's the best way I can describe it. This is definitely one for the people that used to play with Sylvanian families. I absolutely love Sylvanian families, and this is literally Sylvanian families come to life, and like you're reading little stories about them. We follow a group of these animal characters, and we basically just go on these adventures with them and see what they get up to, and it's just so lighthearted, so fun. It literally had me giggling, and it also just has the most stunning illustrations throughout as well. Let me show you. Like, I'm sorry, what? It's literally stunning. And these characters are just so quirky and so funny, and they all have their own little personality. And yeah, it's just such a fun read. It's one that I literally recommend to everybody because I feel like everybody needs a little bit of this book in their life. It's just a lot of fun and it brings me a lot of happiness, and I would definitely recommend. And that's a wrap on all 25 book recommendations. I honestly feel like I've been chatting for hours and hours. But hopefully you have some new books now that are now on your radar, that you're interested in, that you want to add to your TBR. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. Please let me know if you did, and I will hopefully see you in my next one.